Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Trip of a Lifetime podcast with me, Celeste.
And me, Jasmine.
This episode, we're talking about The Girl in the Fireplace, which was written by Stephen Moffat, directed by Euros Lyn, and it first aired on the 16th of May 2006. Now, I think the first thing that is quite obvious as someone who has watched this episode quite a few times and is familiar with Stephen Moffat's work is that this story was clearly based off of The Time Traveler's Wife. Because that story, I mean, Stephen Moffat has actually adapted that into a HBO TV series that was cancelled after the first season. Because I don't think many people gelled with it very well. But also, River's storyline in Doctor Who is also heavily based on Time Traveler's Wife. In that's not a secret. He has said that multiple times. It is a known fact, and so you, based on that knowledge, you can tell that this episode also takes some aspects of that as well. With the Doctor. I mean, sure, they're both kind of going in a linear direction. They're both going in the same direction, but his for him, it's only been a couple of minutes, whereas her it's been, months, years, decades in some cases. Your first thoughts?
Well, before I say my first thoughts, I was going to say that is my favourite trope. Like the time traveler's wife kind of trope is my favourite.
I mean, you love River and the Doctor's storyline. I think you've said that's one of your favourite storylines.
And I also...
Oh, sorry. Sorry. That's my fault.
And also, I absolutely love the Time Traveler's Wife, like the book and the movie adapted, like both. I haven't seen the show, but I love that, and it's just a great trope. I love it. Chef kiss.
Yeah.
The overview.
The
overview.
What overview?
Of the episode.
Sorry.
So, overview-wise, I really, 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 really like this episode, and I know that's not like a great description. However, A, you've got the time traveler's wife trope, and I'm going to say this so many times this episode.
Okay.
B, I love the villains.
Yeah.
And I love like all the clock themes and like the they're kind of robotic and steampunky.
Yeah, it's kind of steampunky, but it's also very much French fashion as well. So it's kind of like the merge of the two aesthetics.
It's just I love it. I love the aesthetic, just like you said. I love it. It is a bit weird though. It's also goes back to sort of like Amelia Pond vaguely. I don't know. I'm not gonna spoil anything. Don't worry.
Yeah.
However, where they met the Doctor or a time traveler, let's just say that, because I'm also going to link it to the time traveler's wife again.
Yeah.
When they were little, and then as they've grown up, they started liking this figure, which is a bit...
Yeah, although I would say with Amy is that she's less into... I mean, she does try to kiss him at one point, but then after he rejects her, she does back off. And Stephen Moffat has said in the past that he kind of regrets putting that scene in there because one of the producers told him that they didn't think that was a good idea to keep the scene in, and he ignored them. So, anyway, one kind of behind the scenes fact is that after they filmed this episode, Sophia Myles, who plays Renette, like adult Renette, ends up dating David Tennant for a bit. I think they only dated for maybe about a year. Well, it didn't last for too long. But also the Dimensions in Time video game that stars Jodie Whittaker as 13 and David Tennant as 10. There's a part where you end up going into an alternate dimension at one point, and in that universe, 10 ended up marrying Renette and having a couple of kids with her, which is such a weird... In a way, it's kind of a weird point to do that with, because like you just assume that if they were going to do that with anyone, they'd go with Rose instead, but no, they chose Renette, which I find interesting. The other thing to bring up with Sophia Myles is that there has been some level of controversy in terms of her, because we mentioned on this podcast the actor who plays Mickey has had a lot of allegations against him in terms of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and things like that, by over 20 women from uh, the time period from about 2004, so that's just before he started in Doctor Who, through to what about 2020 when the allegations kind of came out. And with that, in the first wave, the first 20 women, none of them were from the set of Doctor Who. But in the second wave, that a couple of, I think one of them was a runner and the other one was a driver. They were, both women who were in very low kind of jobs in terms of the hierarchy on set. Both said that he'd made advances with them and made things difficult for both of them, and that they went to some of the higher ups. I don't know if they mention who exactly, and then kind of just get ignored or told to, or they got moved to other sets and locations instead, almost to brush it under the carpet. But anyway, Sophia Miles, even though she's supposed to be, she declares that she's a massive feminist and that she's, supportive of people who go through these kind of things. She actually said in a chat, in like I think it was a Twitter live or something, with the actor who plays Nikki, in attendance to that, like virtually, because it was all a virtual thing, um, that she didn't believe these people because, and this is a rough paraphrasing of what she said, was that, he didn't hit on her when she was at her fittest, so she doesn't think it happened to any woman because of it, which is kind of ridiculous, especially when you consider that the people he would um, take advantage of were always in a lower position to him in terms of hierarchy. When he was an actor, it was runners and things. When he became producer and director, then it was other actors who he was employing. Whereas in this, they were on a level playing field. Or in some sense, arguably, she was slightly higher because she'd at this point been in a few Hollywood movies and was, a well-known actor at this point. So yeah, Sophia Miles not really viewed as a very um, good light in the Doctor Who fandom at the moment. Um, anyway, moving on to a slightly less upsetting topic, shall we say? Uh, Body horror.
You just said body horror.
That wasn't actually what I was going. I wasn't actually sure what the next point was, but it was the next one on the list. Okay.
I just don't know body horror. I just
Oh god, sorry. So I think this is the first instance, at least in New Who, that we get some proper body horror because we
mm,
haven't encountered the Cybermen yet. We haven't had like the Daleks with made from parts of Davros or parts of humans yet. Um, but this is the first proper kind of body horror moment we get. Because I thought, oh yeah, this is Stephen Moffat's most light-hearted story, forgetting that the ship was fixed with pieces of human, or well, we're presuming they're human. We don't actually know. So engine is powered by a pump, which is a human heart, and then you've got like an eye as a camera, and but it's one of those interesting things because with the clockwork robots, they're not what you'd stereotypically think when you think the word robot or the words artificial intelligence, because with that you think kind of, well, more like the Cybermen, I guess, with the kind of silvery, very kind of state of the art. Whereas this, I mean, I guess if it in pre-revolutionary France, clockwork was state of the art at that point, but it's just interesting that Stephen's exploring the dangers of AI, but with such a kind of mechanical aesthetic to it. It's an interesting juxtaposition. I quite like it, because you've obviously got these robots who, I'm going to be honest, are probably well intentioned. They're doing what they're programmed to do because they don't have any. They can't understand nuance. That they're told to fix the ship however they can, and so as the Doctor says, no one told them that the crew was off the menu.
hi.
Hello.
um, no, I do agree with you there. But also, you've got also that line that kind of adds. I want to say dark humor,
Yeah.
whereas like the barbecue line, where it smells like a barbecue.
Yeah, because obviously when Stephen wrote that, he knew why
Mm.
that it smelled like barbecue, and I knew when going into. I mean, I'd forgotten that that line was even a thing. I'm not even sure if I ever really took it on board originally, but but yeah, hearing that line and going, oh God, I know what that's referring to. And then you've got Rose's realization because they were talking about how it smelled like a roast dinner kind of thing. And then you're like, oh God, that's human flesh cooking in the engine as fuel. Like that's what that smell is.
Yeah, that kind of added like a sense of dark humor to it, which added more with the body horror as well.
Yeah.
I do really like the aesthetic of the robots. This feels really weird because I'm laying on my back. Sorry, but I did really like the aesthetic of the robots. Robots? No, robots. And the fact that they're clock based and they're
Yeah.
kind of quite jittery robots.
Hmm.
And it kind of gave like sort of an again steampunky, renaissancey kind of feel, which I really liked. It fitted in kind of with the time era, but it also didn't because obviously they didn't have that technology. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree with you.
Sorry.
One thing I found really interesting that I mean, this isn't the first time this has happened, but I think it's the first time it was so obvious. Is because the Doctor is split up from Mickey and Rose for the majority of this episode, which during the first half I almost thought it was going to be a companion light episode, but actually Rose and Mickey are still in it a lot. It's just that they did this so that they could film the other episode on the block at the same time. I'm not entirely sure what episode that would have been, but anyway, yeah, but Mickey basically starts trying to undermine Rose and the Doctor's relationship. It's almost a kind of last ditch attempt because at this point he is still in denial, but by next episode he's finally realised that that Rose is never going to actually choose him. She's always going to choose the Doctor, and so he's kind of because Nicky, at least to start off with, has been just shown that he doesn't have much shame. He's kind of desperate. He will do anything to try and get what he wants, and so he's basically trying to manipulate Rose into staying with him by going on about how you've seen Sarah Jane, you've seen the way he's talking about Renette, and and if he'd known about the characters like Jabe or Linda with the Y, he'd probably add them in as well with people that the Doctor's flirted with a lot. And it's adding on to that kind of theme that runs throughout this whole series that Rose isn't the first companion or even lover that he's ever had, and she won't be the last.
It is kind of interesting that he flirts with her specifically when they're all the companions are away. I know he does it anyway,
You're,
usually.
you're talking about Renette, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Sorry.
No, just to clarify, because we were
um.
just talking about Rose.
Uh. I find it interesting that he does it specifically when the companions are away. But I know in other episodes he has done it in front of his companions. But he's
Yeah.
specifically more flirty without his companions, and it's kind of like Renette is kind of like also flirting back too.
Oh, she is very much flirting back.
Mm.
But I also wonder, you almost think, what had happened if the ending hadn't been as tragic as it was, and what if, he just grabbed Renette's hand as it spun round. If she had gone into the TARDIS with Rose and Mickey, what would have happened to Rose and the Doctor's dynamic? Which one of them would he have chosen?
Mm.
That's what I wonder. Would he have chosen Renette over Rose? Would he have not have? Because Renette, she's very perceptive. She figures out as soon as she meets Rose, really, that she's in love with the Doctor. Um, which brings me on to my next point, which is the Doctor when he uses his psychic powers, because we don't see the Doctor use psychic powers very often. In fact, we're more likely to see the Master use it than the Doctor, because in the classic series, the Master would hypnotize humans very regularly. We've never, and that actually becomes quite a big plot point in series 3. But anyway, so we see the Doctor put his hands on Renette's face and kind of look through her memories. And she then looks back through the door into his own memories, which she's not supposed to do, and he's really taken off guard with that. And it's just interesting because I actually read up briefly Renette's Wikipedia page, because I didn't know anything about her, but she, despite being, a courtesan, the king's mistress, not only was she treated with the utmost respect, even at the time, she was a highly influential figure, and somewhat controversial as well because she took on quite a few roles that men were supposed to do back then because she was a political advisor as well as a mistress to the king. But also in the actual episode itself, it never feels like Stephen's kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, slut shaming her. You know what I mean? He doesn't go, "Oh God, she's a sex worker. She deserves to be treated like shit." Like he treats her with the utmost respect, um, which I find really interesting given how much he sexualizes a lot of the other characters, the female characters in his run. But Renette, he gives a lot of respect to, which I find interesting because it could have been so easy for him to do that and people wouldn't have batted an eyelash. But like the fact that she's a mistress and a courtesan is kind of, I mean, it's mentioned a couple of times, but it's kind of, brushed under the carpet. It's kind of, skipped over almost. Linking back to when the doctor has his hands on Renette's face and he's doing the kind of mind link type thing. That's kind of a thread that's been picked up by other showrunners later on. Like you see Russell use that exact same thing at the end of series 4, no spoilers. Um which you kind of almost wonder, did he subconsciously get that from the Girl in the Fireplace, maybe to some extent. But also in Spyfall Part 2, there's a whole thing about between the Doctor and the Master, with the whole, them connecting and using telepathy to speak with each other, which hadn't been used in the show, at least not in the new series. Just find that interesting because the Doctor's powers. I mean, I think there was an article on it in Doctor Who magazine where the Doctor's powers. He's got a lot of them, but a lot of them don't get mentioned or don't really come up unless they're needed for a plot. Otherwise they're ignored completely. The next thing I was going to say was one of Moffat's key lines throughout his era was the Doctor's name being important,
Mm.
and also the link with Doctor Who as a question. And Renette, I think, as far as I'm aware, is the first person in the New Who to say Doctor Who, kind of,
Mm.
in that sense. And it was just after that mind link that she then, says there's a lot more to you than that and things like that, which implies that Renette actually knows the Doctor's name, which I find interesting because that's a thing with all, I think all of the Doctor's love interests in Moffat's era know the Doctor's name.
Mm.
Like River knows the Doctor's name, the Master knows the Doctor's name, and Clara knows the Doctor's name. Canonically, all three of them. And I just find that funny. That the one way you can tell that when Moffat's gonna make one of the characters the Doctor's love interest is when they find out the name. Like I like that. Um, it's interesting to me.
I think it's like a nice personal touch because no one else knows his name, and it's kind of like you're important. You're the only one I trust with this secret.
Mm.
And I don't know what else I was gonna say. I was gonna say maybe it could be important later on, or it just might be a continuing running gag where we never find out what his name is. You know, I do find that quite interesting.
Well, I kind of hope that we never find out what the Doctor's name
Mm.
is because there's so much mystery that's been put behind it that it almost, whatever any showrunner would say is his name would kind of be quite anticlimactic at this point, let's be honest. And also, I don't think we'd buy it as an actual Gallifreyan name at
Mm.
this point. But also, I think it's interesting as someone who's read a lot of fantasy novels. I've read a lot of novels based around the Fae, fair folk, fairies, essentially. And one of the things is that they're tricksters. They speak in truths, but they're riddles at the same time. They're kind of half truths. But one thing about them is that you should. It's a thing in the Skullduggery Pleasant book series. It's a thing in a lot of stuff around fairies is that you should never actually tell anyone your real name because your real name holds power,
Mm.
and in the wrong hands, could be really dangerous. So I almost wonder if it's the same with Time Lords, that you can't. The reason why they don't say tell their real name to people and why they choose their own name is because it doesn't have as much power over them. Because, prior to choosing their own names, they were given nicknames at the academy. The Doctor was known as Theta Sigma, the Master was known as Koshi, the Rani is Ushas, and the meddling monk is Mortimus, among other people. There are a couple of others, but those are the main four that people really care about. So, yeah, I hope we never find out what the Doctor's real name is, because no answer that anyone could give us would be satisfying.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. Also with this episode, there's a really I really like that scene where the Doctor's with the robots.
Mm.
And then he has the Mr. Thickety,
Oh
that
god,
one, and so's your dad.
the
I love
iconic
that one.
line.
And what's the other one? It's like the banana.
What, the inventing the banana daiquiri a couple of centuries too early or something, and him
Yeah.
pretending to be drunk, like iconic. Like that whole scene is just so good.
I think that is one of my favorite scenes, other than the one where he goes through the mirror on a horse.
Yeah, but there's that whole line of where Mickey's like, "What's a horse doing with a spaceship?" And he's like, "Mickey, what's pre-revolutionary France doing with a spaceship?" Gets some perspective. Like, it's just one of the most iconic lines in the show. Now, one of the big mystery running through this episode is, of course, why Renette specifically,
Mm.
why Madame de Pompadour, and of course, I mean, having viewed this episode before, we know that the ship is called the SS Madame de Pompadour, but it's a mystery that the characters in the show don't ever discover, and I find that really interesting. And then of course the Clockwork Robots themselves, they actually do get brought back eventually, but not for, oh god, was it about, well, I'm just trying to calculate in my head. It's about 6 seasons between appearances with that villain. They do come back in an episode in series 8. No spoilers, but well, yeah, I actually saw that episode in the cinema when it came out, and none of us had any idea when watching it that it was the Clockwork Robots to come back again. It's a twist near the end of the episode. I'm not going to tell you which episode it is because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched that episode yet.
You need to tell me because I've absolutely forgotten what the episode is.
Okay, I'll tell you afterwards. Okay. Have you got any other comments? Oh, actually, no, I have one. Sorry. Just interrupt you and myself. Um, is the ending. I'm not. I've watched this episode quite a few times, but honestly, I can't remember the last time I was this affected by the ending. Like the last few times, it's going because I know how it's going to end. Normally, it doesn't really bother me, but this time I actually felt really sad. And I don't know whether it was because I was, this time I was analysing it, but so I was therefore getting slightly more invested in the story than I normally do. But I don't know, like, despite knowing that it ends tragically with Renette dying off screen of um some kind of illness, I can't exactly remember what, but because apparently, according to a Wikipedia article, she battled a lot of illnesses over her
Mm.
life. She was quite a frail woman. And she died at the age of, I believe it was 42, 43.
Mm.
Yeah, like, I knew it was coming, and yet it still hit me really hard.
I agree again with you there. I Whenever I watch that scene, it does hit me hard. It's almost as hard as it hit when I watched Father's Day, because Father's Day always makes me
Oh
cry.
god, yeah.
Um, I always find it sad because I just don't like the idea that you have like those shows or movies where you watch someone grow up and at the very end they die. You know, I don't like that idea that I know everyone dies in the end at
Yeah.
some point. However, I just don't like the idea because, especially if it's a character that we, enjoyed watching on screen, and you kind of like what would have happened if. I mean, obviously she was supposed to die because it was like a fixed point in time. But what would
Yeah.
have happened if the 10th Doctor, took her with him?
Mm. Yeah, because it's like the first film I watched this year was One Day, which was based on a novel by David Nichols, directed by Lone Scheffenberg, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and starring Anne Hathaway. And this is a bit of a spoiler, but this film came out in 2011, so it's been out for a while. Is that basically the point of One Day is that you see these two characters on the same day every year, um, from like the day they meet when they're like leaving, I think it's university, through to them eventually finally getting together and getting married. But you actually see her die because they're not. I think they're only together for about maybe a year, and then she gets hit by a car when she's on her bicycle, and it was a bit of a cliche ending. Like, I know it was based on the book, but it's like, it's almost always the female love interest that dies,
Mm.
and with that kind of novel.
Almost like another TV show that we mentioned earlier
I'm blanking. What?
with Neil Patrick
Neil
Harris.
Patrick? What? How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Oh, what? Yeah, this was two
Yeah.
episodes ago for you guys, but yeah, I haven't watched How I Met Your Mother, so I mean, I know the ending was bad, but
Mm.
that's all I really know about that show.
But it's always like the female love interest that dies if someone does die.
Yeah, it's called Fridging. You're based because that's from a Green Lantern comic where his girlfriend gets killed and then shoved into a fridge, and that's how he discovers that she's dead. Because
My
he
god!
opens his fridge.
No! That's horrible! Why?
Like, that is where that term
Jesus
comes from.
Christ!
Fun
And
fact.
when you said Green Lantern, all I could think of is Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern. He just opens the
Oh
door, it's
God,
like,
it's like a,
oh.
a frozen Blake Lively.
But like, I also see like the love interest from Deadpool.
Oh God, what Marina Baccarin.
Yeah,
I think that's how you pronounce her
but in the
name.
fridge.
Yeah, God.
Oh my god.
Yes, that's an interesting way to end this episode of the podcast. Yes, out of interest, how did you rate this episode?
Well, no, I'd say a 10. Or higher than a 10, which I don't think I can do, but
You can't do higher than a 10. I did not. I did 9.5. It's not quite a perfect episode for me, but
Mm.
it's pretty close.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's it for this episode of A Triple Lifetime podcast. And I hope to see you next time when what? You alright?
No, just continue.
Okay, sorry, you just moved. Um Oh God. Okay. I hope to see you next time when we review. I believe next time it's going to be. Oh, what's the name of the two-parter?
The ones I don't
Yeah,
like.
it's the Cyberman two-parter. Is it something in Steel?
Yeah. A Nightmare in Steel?
No,
No.
that's you're not thinking Nightmare in Silver.
Oh.
It's the two-part Cyberman episode of series 2. Everyone knows what we're talking about if you've watched it. Oh, that's really gonna bug me that I can't remember the name of that. Uh, Hold on. I just looked at my phone. It's Rise of the Cyberman Age of Steel is next podcast episode. Um, yeah, I know you've got some conflicting feelings about that one. But yeah, so hope to see you next time. Bye.
Don't have nightmares about fridging. Bye!